Hello, dear subscribers, watchers, and honestly, hello, class. I know it's Friday and I have missed many weeks. I haven't uploaded any video for you yet. But today, I want to share a new video where I'm going to explain to you a new topic. So let's get ready to start. Today's class is going to focus on mixed and illogical constructions. So just let me share the presentation I got for you today. So as I was telling you, today's discussion is going to be about mixed and illogical constructions. But what are these mixed and illogical constructions? Well, when we make constructions in English, sometimes we intend to make sentences that are clearly logical, and thoroughly complete, right? However, when we have sometimes constructions in which every part of the sentence seems to be disconnected, we have a mistake that is pretty common, and that it is very disruptive because it really distracts the reader from understanding the meaning of what you really want to say. Illogical sentences might be defined or might be focused on this definition you see on the screen. Every part of the sentence must agree with the other parts in some logical way if the meaning of the sentences is to be clear. Remember that for a sentence to be a sentence, it needs to meet all the requirements. It must begin with a capital letter, end with a period, be logical, and complete in itself. So when we talk about these, we need to remember that we need to be sure that the subject makes sense in its relationship to the verbs. Why? Because if not, we have vague constructions, and vague constructions are called mixed and illogical constructions. You have an example here, and it says, the first case of smallpox dates back more than 1,000 years before the birth of Christ and had gone unchecked until recently. Do you see the logic of this sentence? This sentence is illogical. Why? Because if you see, this lacks the logic saying that the first case of smallpox dates back more than 1,000 years before the birth of Christ. And then it says that it has gone unchecked until recently. So it was discovered before Jesus Christ, but it had gone unchecked. Here we have an improved version of this sentence for it to be logical. The first case of smallpox dates back more than 1,000 years before the birth of Christ only, but only recently has the disease been checked. So it was discovered before Christ, but it has been checked and probably diagnosed and treated okay just until now or recently. Second form of an illogical construction. Every verb must have a clear-cut subject. When we don't have a clear-cut subject, sometimes we confuse prepositional phrases by naming them as if they are the subjects of the sentence. And you have an example here of a vague construction. With a family to support makes his decision all the more important. Does it make sense to you? Can you clearly identify the simple subject of the sentence? Probably not. So an improved version of this one might suggest the possessive plus a noun. So having here a possessive gerund saying his family, or sorry, he's having a family to support makes his decision all the more important. So here see a gerund phrase that states the subject of the sentence. We will never have a prepositional phrase as a subject of the sentence, because if we leave it this way, then we're going to lead to have an illogical construction that will definitely create a vague sentence. We should avoid vagueness and awkward constructions in order to make our writing effective, academic, and standard. 3. Adjust the form of an indirect quotation to the rest of the sentence. Sometimes illogical constructions happen because we mix direct speech and indirect speech. You see an example here. A vague construction says, the boy asked us, would we give him a lift to Canora? But this one started as if we were going to use direct speech, and later we changed to indirect speech. So an improved version of this one will say, the boy asked us if we would give him a lift to Kenora. As we probably have seen in other classes, in other courses, or in another topic, when we use indirect speech, we use the introductory clause here, the boy asked us, and then we will switch. We will use the if here, and then we will change the order. So we will have this word inversion so that we can have first the subject and then the auxiliary. We won't use the question form like in this big construction because this one will be direct speech. All right? So number 4 says, avoid mixed constructions. Why? Because sometimes we use, for example, despite and in spite of in the same way when they are used in a different way. You see here, despite of what you say, I think you're wrong. In spite of is confused with despite. Here you have the correction for this sentence, and you have two options in which you can say it. In spite of what you say, I think you're wrong. Despite what you say, I think you are wrong. What do you see in the correction? Is there any difference? There is a difference. In spite of plus what you say, in spite of. And then you have the noun phrase here. Well, the noun clause here, what you say. And here you have despite what you say. You don't say despite of, you say only despite and then here the clause or the phrase. But in spite of, in spite needs the preposition of or the particle of, if you want to call it that way. In spite of has 3 parts, despite only 1. Okay, despite goes alone. You don't have to marry him or marry the word despite with the word of. Number 5, our constructions like I can hardly see you are double negatives. Why? You have to avoid double negatives because already saying can't says that you have a negative construction, and hardly is a negative adverb as well. An improved version of this one can be I can hardly see you. Another example is he hasn't scarcely any money. Does he have money or does he lack the money? He has scarcely any money. Generally, when you use negative adverbs like this one, scarcely, hardly, almost, you won't use negative constructions, okay? You will use affirmative constructions and you will have these negative meaning adverbs. Here you have an example that you can write down. On your paper, rewrite the following sentences, making them logical, and be ready to discuss these ones in class. The book tells the story of a man who lost his money and his struggle against poverty. Is it okay? Is it logical? I will leave only this presentation here, just this slide for you to copy it and for you to think about it and be ready to discuss it in class. The second one says, her hair is blonde and her eyes are a clear gray with a cute little nose and a dimpled cheek. Once again, is this one logical? Is there any part that looks odd? For you to identify and to mark the mistakes of this type of mixed and illogical constructions, you will underline that part that looks odd, that looks weird, or that looks awkward. And if it's the whole sentence, then you will underline the whole sentence. Be ready to have your choices explained in class because we're going to discuss them. And let's continue. Sometimes also having mixed constructions or illogical constructions is a result of having faulty comparisons. We compare often people, products, prices, etc. Sometimes artful, like this one, Shakespeare, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. And oftentimes prosaic, like your coworker saying passionately, Harry Potter was better than the Lord of the Rings. Comparisons help to see commonalities and differences between and among people, things, and ideas. But sometimes we need to remember that faulty comparison happens when the comparison is not complete or when the items that are being compared are different categories. Like if you're comparing apples and oranges, they are fruits both, but they are different. Faulty comparisons are illogical constructions, which often means that the ideas you intend to convey may not come through to your reader and may render a statement or argument ineffective. Here in the handout that you will be given with this, or in this presentation that I will share with you later in classroom, we will discuss several kinds of comparison. Errors in degree of comparison, incomplete and ambiguous comparison, and illogical comparisons that you may have on the way. And here you see an example of it. Avoiding errors in degrees of comparison. The degree of comparison speaks to the three forms of adjectives that can be used when comparing items: positive, comparative, and superlative. Let's discuss the degrees of comparisons along with the most common errors that writers make in forming these comparisons. So these formations that we have result in a mistake. The positive form refers to the unaltered version of an adjective, such as smart, funny, and young. This form can be used to compare items when combined with as. It is important to note that the adjective should have as prior to the following to the one following it in order for the comparison to be complete. Example: Josh is as smart as Kelsey. So you see here as, then the positive form of the adjective, and then as, and then you compare one person to another. When it comes to degrees of comparison, you should use comparatives and superlative forms of adjectives. Why? Typically, you will use the comparative degree in association with with than. Example: he read Whitman's poem faster than Casey did. Here, once again, remember, you need to have the comparison and then here, than, which means that you're comparing one thing and the other. The comparative degree is used when you are comparing two items. Most comparatives use the ending er, like faster or smarter or smoother or shorter. And there are exceptions like less, which will be discussed below, and that are irregular. But some of these adjectives require you to use more if they are more than two syllables. And in other cases, you will also apply this rule for adverbs as well. So you say, for example, more attractive, more intelligent, more enthusiastic, etc. Here you see that we will discuss some guidelines for deciding whether you should use the ER ending or more when you use the comparative degree. You already know that monosyllable adjectives or bisyllable adjectives might not need more, but ER at the end. But those that are more than three syllables need more. Most one syllable adjectives, as I was saying, will need ER. But those adjectives that are longer, that have more than three syllables, will add more before them. However, you should keep in mind that there are exceptions to these guidelines because there are some two-syllable adjectives that use the ending er, such as simple, and you go with simpler. So you don't add an e, but you just add an r. As always, if you're not sure if an adjective should end in er or use more, you can always look it up in a dictionary. Why so? Because English has rules, but it also has exceptions. So in order to avoid a mistake, look for it in the dictionary. It's the safest thing to do. Note, if you're using adjectives that end in er in the same list with adjectives that use more, the adjectives that end in er should be listed before the adjectives that use more. You should also note that there is a specific order for presenting adjectives in a list. I think you already know the acronym NOSESCOMP that can help you know the way in which you're going to order the adjectives. And if you don't know, I can make another video where I'm explaining to you the order of adjectives. But here you have a list like observation, pretty, physical, description, color, that includes size, shape, age, and color, origin, material, and the qualifiers that you may have. You have an example here of the note that I was explaining. To avoid mixed and illogical constructions, you should list the adjectives that have er endings and add the ones that need more at the end. Example, she is smaller, and more beautiful than Kylie is. I will change the word smaller for shorter. So she's smarter, shorter, and more beautiful than Kylie is. The superlative degree compares three or more items and is considered the greatest degree. Many superlatives end with est, like smartest, fastest, and smallest, unless the superlative ends with a y, in which you would end with or iest, like happiest. This rule also applies to the comparative degree that ends in a y, such as easier. Normally, the superlative degree is preceded by the and is followed by a noun in the sentence. You here see an example. Karen has the highest grade in the group. While we're discussing comparative and superlative degrees, let's also discuss irregular adjectives and adverbs. Because these words are irregular, you need to also change the degree. And when you change it, you may be aware that to change the word completely instead of adding er or est to the end may also complicate your life a little, and then you come up with an illogical construction. So, for example, the comparative form of little is less. It's not little, right? It's less. And the superlative form is the least. If you are unsure about whether the word changes completely or if it only just needs the ER or DSD at the end, once again, I recommend you use a dictionary. The way you do it when you're not sure about a verb and how it is conjugated or the form it has in a past participle form or in the past form, you should use a dictionary. Dictionaries are a great help when you are in need and in doubt. Faulty comparison can also occur when a comparative ending in ER or the superlative ending in EST is used with words like more, most, less, or least. For example, you wouldn't say more tastier, you would say tastier. This kind of faulty comparison is called a double comparative or double superlative, and it happens a lot. This is a very common mistake by non-native speakers. They will say more easier, right? So probably adding two doubles will eliminate one and the other. So when you use both, you're saying nothing. So you should be very careful and not to say double comparatives or double superlatives. Here you see an example. Brandon's resume is more clear than Daniel's. More clear? You cannot say that. So you will say Brandon's resume is clearer than Daniel's. Double comparatives and double superlatives are the markers of an unsophisticated writer or speaker. Why unsophisticated? Because it is wrong and it is unacceptable? Probably not, because you will be understood. But remember that we're writing conventionally and we're writing in a standard way. And if it's standard, it should be understood by everyone and it should be flawless. That is what I'm encouraging you to do, to have, I would say, the fewest mistake possible in your writing. And here, let's talk about absolute concepts in this section. We also have absolutes. Remember that we studied absolutes when we were studying sentence fragments, but these absolutes are not phrases or clauses. There are certain words that are considered to be absolute and so cannot be logically compared. And you have the examples of the words perfect and unique. These words are considered to be absolutes because by definition, there is no degree of comparison for them. Something is either perfect or it is not. There are no there are no higher degrees for perfection. Like, I don't know if you have ever heard that, but people say more pregnant than. She's very pregnant. You cannot say that someone is very pregnant. One person is pregnant or not. So here you have an example. Incorrect. Ernest wrote the most perfect correspondence today. That's incorrect. That is illogical. Or that is a mixed construction. You have mixed the construction for a positive adjective and you have used here the superlative form of the adjective when it doesn't have a superlative form of the adjective. Correct version of this one, Ernest wrote a perfect correspondence today. As you can see by the example, the correspondence can be perfect, but it cannot be more perfect or the most perfect. It is important to know that you can use adverbs like almost before the absolute. For example, the example that you saw there can be changed to Ernest wrote a nearly perfect correspondence today. Nearly, because it means almost, right? But you cannot say more perfect, right? So you have to be very careful. Be careful, and that this is a piece of homework for you as well. Consider not to use the comparative or superlative forms of adjectives that are non-gradable. I'm not going to explain that here in the video, but I'm going to ask you in class. So make sure that you find out what a non-gradable adjective or a non-gradable adverb is. Now, talking about ambiguous comparisons is talking about mixed constructions and illogical constructions. Here you see an incomplete and ambiguous comparison. How so? Take a look at this. Severe is not as mean. As mean as who, or as mean as what? Severe is not as mean as Abigail is. This sentence you see here is worded in a way that indicates there is a comparison, but the comparison is incomplete because we don't know what is being compared. And here, in this revised version, you see a complete comparison between two people, Xavier and Abigail. Comparisons must always be complete because otherwise the reader will not understand completely what is being said. In order for the reader to understand what items are being compared, the comparison needs to be complete. Remember that. Do not leave your sentences incomplete. Every verb must have a clear-cut subject. I have already explained that. I have already explained quotations, just to refresh your mind. I have already explained the constructions that can be mixed up. I have already explained the double comparatives when using these adverbs that have a negative meaning. We have already gone over this one. We have already gone through the faulty comparisons of adjectives and adverbs. We have already gone over positive, comparative, and superlative degrees of adjectives. And remember, when you are in doubt about things, look for them in the dictionary. Consult, ask questions. It's not a difficult topic, but it needs you to read and be sure about this in order not to make ambiguous, vague, or awkward constructions. Whenever you see in your journals, in your papers, this recommendation, change these, we don't understand this is vague, this is very awkward, you need to reword your sentences, your clauses, or your phrases. Here you see, when writing a comparative sentence, the comparison must be clear so the reader will know what is being compared. Otherwise, the comparison is ambiguous. You have an example here. Naomi scored more points in this basketball game. This complete example is clear about what is being compared, the one that you see below. Naomi's performance in this game is being compared to her performance in the previous game. Now, in this example, you see a clearer explanation of this. So what should we take into account then? In the ambiguous example, the reader does not know what is being compared. Are we comparing Naomi's points to the rest of the team points, to another specific player's points, or that she scored more points in this game than she did in the rest of the games of the season? While in the second one, you're saying Naomi scored more points than she did in the last game. Now you are comparing and you're making the statement more specific and clearer. Now, as you see here, as you can see, each of these examples includes either as or than. As and than often indicate that there is going to be a comparison in the sentence. You must be careful when using these terms, though, because when the sentence includes more than one noun that could be compared, the comparison can be ambiguous. And here you see an example. Keith helped Amber more than Elizabeth on the homework assignment. This sentence is ambiguous because we do not know if Keith helped Amber more than Elizabeth helped Amber, or if Keith helped Amber more than Elizabeth did. Kind of ambiguous, right? Confusing. Keith helped Amber more than Elizabeth. Who helped who? It's an illogical construction, and it is mixed. We don't know who is modifying who or who's helping who. And here you have a clear version of this one. Keith helped Amber more than he helped Elizabeth on the homework. Now, in this comparison, it's clear because we know the complete comparison is Keith helped Amber more than he helped Elizabeth. This usually happens as well when we have two nouns, or probably when we are using two proper nouns, or the names of people who we don't know are female or male. And then we are comparing, so we have an obscure pronoun reference, and that makes our sentence be a little bit illogical, confusing, or awkward. Illogical comparisons occur when two or more items are compared, but the items are not in the same category. For example, you cannot compare Dickinson's poetry with Whitman's. You have to compare their poems, probably, but not them. For the most part, students tend to make this mistake because they think a sentence is self-explanatory. You must always include specifically what or who is being compared in order for the reader to understand fully what is being discussed. We don't have to assume that people understand what we are writing if we ourselves have to double check what we have written. Here you see an example. The flowers in Kitten's yard are prettier than Jacob. There, you're comparing a place and a person, apparently. But here, to fix the sentence, we provide a logical construction. The flowers in Kitten's yard are prettier than the ones in Jacob's yard. This logical example compares both Kitten's and Jacob's flowers instead of the flowers and the person. Here you have some practice for you, more homework to do. So besides the guidelines, the short notes, and the 10 exercises that you found in classroom, you're going to see more examples here. These 6 items that you see here, copy them, work on them, think about them, and we're going to discuss them in our next class. Here you have more examples about illogical or mixed constructions. I'm going to also pause it a little just for you to copy or take a screenshot or take a picture of it and copy it in your notebook so that later we can discuss them in class. You see here the problem, you see here the answer. But I want you to think about the answers before I actually explain them to you. Here, there are faulty predicates as well. When we talk about mixed and illogical constructions, we sometimes, as I told you at the beginning, have a problem with clear-cut subjects. But what happens when we have faulty predicates? An important step in skin is stopping. Incorrect. An important step in skin is learning to stop. Why? The reason he went to Los Angeles was because he wanted to visit Mickey. The reason he went to Los Angeles was that he wanted to visit Mickey. He went to Los Angeles because he wanted to visit Mickey. I guess Mickey Mouse, right? If a student who takes not interest in his study, he won't be able to do his lessons well. If a student has no interest in his studies, he won't be able, sorry, there's a mistake here, to do his lessons well. Here you see sometimes the wording that we choose in our sentences creates confusion. And here you see these faulty predicates have to be with the way in which we're using the verb, like here in the example of is. And here you see an incorrect use of because. And here you see an incorrect use of if. So you have to be very careful to avoid constructions that only us can understand. If you're the only one who can understand the sentence, then the sentence might not be effective. So you need to reword it. And here you see another example. A hasty generalization is when you jump to a conclusion. After a linking verb, we should have a subject complement, and subject complements may come in the form of nouns or adjectives, right? Or noun equivalents. But what happens here is that we are making a reader being confused because we're saying a hasty generalization is when. A possible version of this one can be to make a hasty generalization is to jump to conclusion. A hasty generalization is you jump into conclusion. Still, I don't like this one, but let's say that this one can be more acceptable than this one. We should avoid these when constructions. First bite is where skin tissue has been frozen. First bite appears when skin tissue has been frozen. Appears where is correct, but is where wouldn't be an effective sentence. Is when, is where sometimes have or lead us to faulty predicates. And then these mixed constructions, as you can see, once again, we confuse the reader. So instead of having correct sentences, we are making their incorrect sentences. With every effort the student made to explain his problem, got him more confused. Confusing, right? A better version of this one can be, with every effort the student made to explain his problem, he got more confused. That's easier and clearer. Every effort the student made to explain his problem got him more confused. This is better. The fact that Mary was a good secretary, she had many offers for promotion. Totally illogical or mixed. The fact that Mary was a good secretary resulted in her having many offers for promotion. Or, because Mary was a good secretary, she had many offers for promotion. As we have seen in this unit, we can have different ways of fixing a mistake. You can use coordination, you can use subordination, you can use transitional words, and sometimes wording the phrases, the clauses, or even the whole sentence differently can help. When are you going to change everything? When you definitely see that the construction is all mixed up or is totally illogical. You may take any book that you think it is fit for you. You may take any book that you think is fit for you. You may take any book that you think it is. Mistake that you think it is. Mary stayed at a mountain resort and most of her time was spent skiing. What's the problem here? Mary and then most of her time. You're saying here Mary and then you're switching, you're mixing the constructions from Mary to her time. Mary stayed at a mountain resort and spent most of her time skiing. Active voice, passive voice. We're talking about Mary and we think that we're still talking about Mary, but here we're not talking about Mary, we're talking about her time. And here you see another example. I'm not going to solve these examples because I want you to think about it. I'm just introducing the topic, so I'm expecting that you're writing this, you're taking notes in your notebook, you're making many questions so that we can discuss them on Monday. Sorry. Here, I will just let you copy these 3 sentences that you have here, reflect about it, think about the things that I have already explained to you in this video, and I also wish you a very wonderful weekend. Thank you very much for watching one of my videos. Thank you, subscribers, and thank you for all the followers I already have in my channel. Thank you, class. I'll see you on Monday. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.